The name of our podcast, TechSequences, is really a mashup of two words, technology and consequences. We are fascinated by the consequences, intended or unintended, of the internet and related technologies for the way we live, play, and work. We are your hosts, Leslie Daigle and Raad. We started our careers at the dawn of the internet and have been friends, colleagues, and comrades in arms for the better part of 20 years. In this podcast, we examine the impact internet-related technologies have made or may make in our lives. I'm Raad.
And I'm Leslie Daigle.
Welcome to TechSequences, our 101st episode.
Today we've got something a little different. We're going to look back at the last 6 years of our podcasts and share some thoughts and reflections on where we think the next 100 may go.
So, Leslie, do you remember when we first started TechSequences?
Barely. That was a lifetime ago. And so much has changed in the world. I mean, we literally started it just as COVID-19 was crashing down around our heads. And we had no idea the scale of things that could change and how quickly. And
that's right. I think we published our episode in April, and our next episode was about TechSequences and COVID. But if you think about the time back then, places were shutting down. People were staying home. There was a new movement afoot to work at home. And so companies were really in a bind on how to make their employees still do the same amount of work or as efficiently, but now completely change the way people worked. There was uncertainty about what this virus was and what it would mean for larger public health. And we decided that we thought we had a good idea about technology and consequences.
Sometimes it's the consequences that drive the technology. I remember doing a number of episodes on contact tracing because that was a big thing with trying to keep up with the pandemic and figure out where it was going. And I mean, it's not just a question of technology to do contact tracing, but it's also a question of privacy rights and the whole notion of having a COVID vaccine record and how you could share that. And
had to carry your card with you when you traveled. Yeah.
That was when travel became possible again.
That's true.
Mind you, I did not mind at all the 18 months of not traveling for work.
So let's think about, our podcast was about technology and consequences, whether they are intentional or unintentional. And we've covered a number of different topics, if you will, anything from, say, as you said, the contact tracing apps to AI ethics was one of our most recent ones. And we've recently done a bunch of stuff on AI. But think back to 2020. What were some of the things that you think would surprise us if in 2020 someone came and said, well, in 6 years, this is what's going to happen?
I think that we've sort of been hit by AI like a tsunami, and I don't think we're done. I think the key thing is, in my mind, is in 2020, it was still possible to look back at the internet in terms of sort of fairly classical notions of what is the technology of the internet and how does it fit together, what have been the impacts and the consequences. And now I think we are at an inflection point where it's soon not going to be at all about the web and communications. We're just getting entirely wrapped up in AI, what it can do, what it draws out of the universe around it, i.e. all of the information it's sucking down. And, you're already seeing it in their Google search results where, the first hits that you're getting are not now the sponsored results. You're getting an answer right in the top of the query, which is having ramifications in terms of advertising dollars and so on. And we're midstream. I think we've got plenty to talk about in the next 6 years. But that was my perspective. How about you? What would have surprised you about now?
Definitely how quickly AI came on and how much it impacted everything else, including, frankly, things that are part of our infrastructure, like data centers, the construction of data centers, the rise in energy costs, the water consumption. But I think one of the themes, and it has changed, it has remained the same, but it has also changed, is our definition of facts and truth. And, the old adage, seeing is believing, well, with deep fakes is that's no longer true, right? I think we were at that time dealing with misinformation and disinformation on COVID and, vaccines. And now looking back, that's kind of quaint, you know?
Yeah, I think it's the scale is impressive, but it's also so hard to tease apart the extent to which everything was black and white and, left and right and up and
Mm.
down, and now everything is getting it's easier to recognize that there's reality and there's what you're being sold, and you can
You
choose to
think it's
buy.
easier now to recognize it?
Well, maybe not easier to recognize it given your point about deep fakes, but I think it's
Yeah.
maybe if I put it a slightly different way, I anyway find it harder to just take everything at face value, so I question everything.
Yes. Yes. And that was something that folks predicted back then, that it would really erode our trust in institutions, in our media. And now, and I hear this all the time from people who are really media savvy and those who aren't, they say, I don't know what to believe anymore. And so many people now get their news from Twitter or from X or from Instagram, and not necessarily a verified journalistic source.
And that's a theme that we've explored in a number of
Mm-hmm.
episodes, and
Yeah.
how journalism is now has had to adapt in order for the few newspapers that still exist to continue to put out content regularly. Notice I said content and I didn't say news. They
Mm-hmm.
have to create things that are, clickable, attractive, will bring eyeballs, and it's not nearly so much about reporting just the facts, ma'am, as it was 100 years ago.
Washington Post's motto was democracy dies in darkness. And didn't they, for a while, play around with changing that somehow and making it more about engaging stories? I guess that's to our point, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
I also think we've gone from misinformation and disinformation, which were, constructed, and it took some, particularly disinformation. It had to be constructed. It had to be sometimes nation states behind it. It required troll farms and bots to disseminate a campaign. And now we've got hallucinations, right? AI hallucinations that doesn't need a troll farm and can generate very quickly hundreds of thousands, if not million, views. So, one question for us is, how can democracy survive this level of automated persuasion?
Well, it's a good thing we've got many more episodes to go because I don't think that's going to be simple to answer.
I know we didn't have an answer there. We just had a question.
It's also an opportunity, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to find people that will be the right guest for us to talk to explain some facet of this. So if
Mm,
anybody listening to this podcast has any suggestions, they should send us some suggestions for people and topics that we should cover in that light.
yes, absolutely. Let's talk about another theme. What's another theme that you, looking back through our episodes, that you think has either changed in the direction we thought it would be, or our guests thought, or in a completely new direction altogether?
One area that's still in flux is the question of what's valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, I touched on it a minute ago about ads. The ad revenue has driven a lot of the content industry on the web for decades.
Mm,
That's clearly an area that's going to shift because are you really getting eyeballs or are you now getting my agent that's
yes,
looking at your
right.
material? So I think that's in flux and another watch space.
And that's the whole economy of the web, though. So many of these applications, these services survived, if you will, and were able to pay the bills because of advertisers, because clients weren't about to pay Google money to do searches, right? So they depended on advertising. But what would be another model for the web? Would people be willing to pay instead of, being free, effectively being the product, having their data farmed? I'll tell you a story. Recently, I just did an online questionnaire about wanting to get a couple of quotes on insurance. And man, I regret the day I did that. Why did I do that? Because I have now been spammed, despite the fact that I have a number of different services that clean my information from, data agents and data brokers. Every day, I must get 5 or 6 different messages about insurance and GLP-1s. I guess that's the new Viagra.
Yeah, and maybe that just means that you've been successful in clearing your history from the web, because that's just the default generic span of ads. And it wouldn't be so annoying maybe if they were actually even effective and useful, right? I mean, they're not effective and useful.
Oh, totally annoying. Totally annoying. Yeah, you look at one thing and all of a sudden the next day or two, and people say this all the time. My friends say that, oh, I was looking at a particular, I don't know, shoe or whatever. And now everywhere I go, it's the ad for that shoe. So it sort of follows you. The amount of data that is harvested about you and about your proclivities and what you like and preferences is enormous.
Well, I was away from Facebook for 10 days because I was on a work trip where I just didn't have that with me. And I came back and realized that I didn't need to spend as much time on Facebook. And now, on those occasions when I do go to check in on Facebook, I literally get 5 to 10 promoted content pieces before I can even see anything from friends or anything from the groups that I'm in. And it's like this is not actually being successful at trying to draw me back into this space. It's driving me away. So it's clearly not an effective model, or it's overused or something. But I wonder, you asked about looking forward. I think an interesting question is, if we were actually successful at creating agentic AI, i.e., agents acting on our behalf to do some of this research, I wonder if they could do a better job of anonymizing our inputs and making us less the product.
Great question. I hope if there's a designer listening to this could take that to heart. And I think it would be extremely valuable to have something that effectively is your EA. I remember, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, that was one of the things I recall reading, that in the future, they will be, automated software that will be like your own executive assistant. Except that the whole reason to do that for you is to get data about you, to be able to sell you things. And by selling you things, it's no longer merchandise. It's also selling you ideas and points of view and sometimes conspiracy theories. It is really breaching the inner realm of your mind. We did an episode about freedom of thought. And that was really interesting to me because that is a fundamental human right. The ability or the right to think what you want, to not be penalized for those thoughts, and not to have someone interfere or manipulate your thoughts. And yet, that is exactly what's happening.
I grew up in an era when if you got a new television, you broke down the box and put it in the garbage can to put it to the curb. And yes, it was the garbage can because we didn't have recycling. I'm old as dirt. Let's get that out of the way. But we did have TVs, but you didn't, because you didn't want to show off to your neighbors that you just gotten a new TV. And you didn't want to show off to would-be thieves that you'd just gotten a new TV that they should come and steal.
God, back then people actually stole TVs.
I know.
Now you can't give them away.
For real. For real. There's a change. But the point in all of that is the degree to which in our lifespans, what constitutes private information and or information gathering and or, actionable intelligence has really shifted. But going back to TVs and the fact that you can't give them away now, part of the reason you can't give them away is because everybody watches content on their own handheld devices or whatever. I wonder, do we have any thoughts about how the production and consumption of media is going to evolve over the next 100 episodes?
Ooh. I'm going to be dark here. I am fearful. I am fearful about the state of journalistic effort You see a lot of journalists now really paying a very dear price, oftentimes with their lives. So on the one hand, to truly do that kind of work, it's dangerous. On the other hand, who pays for it? Journalism really starts with local journalism and your local news. And you see a lot of these newspaper outlets going out of business. I think we did an episode where I quoted how often, how quickly some of these journalistic outlets are going out. And even, I respect the Guardian, and even the Guardian now, before you get to anything, says, okay, either unblock your ad blockers or you have to click on, okay, I don't want to support you. And I've paid money to support that. However, it's not enough. So my concern about media and consumption of media is complex and worrisome because it's from all sides. It's from the production of it to the distribution of it to who's consuming it and how they're consuming it
and how it gets paid for.
And how it gets paid for.
So I'm going to play one of my favorite cards, which is to say I'm going to go back in time and say, and here's where we went wrong. I can't say that we went wrong, but there was a different fork in the road that we didn't take. Way back when the web, and it was the web, started becoming popular and driving this whole notion of valuable domain names and websites that could draw in money for advertising and so on and so forth. That's about when we stopped trying to build the next generation of technology based on interoperable technologies and standards.
Mm,
So that is the moment where we didn't adopt and deploy things like federated identity systems at scale.
yeah.
And had we done that, we could have had a lot more management of this kind of personal data and its circulation and a
Yes.
lot more control over all of the things that underpin the much more successful underground economy than the overt one. So a question on my mind is, are we now really paying the price for having taken the commercial road too soon without actually finishing building out the infrastructure? I mean, clearly, I haven't built a time machine. I don't think you've built a time machine. So unless that's the technology that we're missing from the next six years,
Yes.
I don't think we're going to go back and fix that. But I wonder if there are implications or things that are going to have to change in order for there to be a happy future for the internet and consequences of technology.
Oh, a long sigh as a response. Do you think the genie has left the bottle with respect to the whole notion of privacy? I mean, what is privacy now? How do you define privacy now?
I think that there are still standard definitions that count. But I think that we live in a world where there are so many concurrent versions of truth circulating around us that, in fact, everything that is known about you is being used to amplify or redirect the version of reality that's being played at you. So I don't think we can go back to having privacy unless or until we can actually start sharing some of the same view of the world and with fewer alternative facts.
Gosh, I really, every time somebody says alternative facts, I kind of get hives, because to me, 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's a fact. There is no alternative in which 2 plus 2 is going to equal 3.5 or 5. Yet I think you bring up a point, which is the melding of, aside from the technology, I mean, the technology definitely enables this, the melding of opinion and fact has become such that it is hard for you to prize apart what is the actual fact versus the opinion. The fact, it's 100 degrees today. Opinion, 100 degrees, is that hot for you? For a human being, that's very hot given whatever context.
And it depends who's telling you, right? Because if
Yeah.
it's somebody you don't like telling you it's 100 degrees out, you're going to go out and stomp outside with your thermometer and say, I'm going to prove to you it's not 100 degrees out today, which is
Yes.
not really a helpful basis for collaborative communities.
We've done a lot of stuff on collaboration, right? And how collaboration has actually worked. If you think about open source, if you think about how the internet, was born, this truly amazing thing that changed our lives. And now we're in the midst of another revolution. But now technology has driven us further apart. Would you say that is a true statement?
I don't know if I think technology has driven us further apart. I think the information systems and the information that we've slung about our universe
Mm-hmm.
is. allowing ourselves to drive us apart. If I knew how to fix that, I'd probably be rich. But I mean, it is partly an overuse of the simple argument, technology doesn't kill people, people kill people with technology.
Mm.
Technology does not create bad information. People create bad information and disseminate it heartily with technology.
Well, I guess technology, you use the example of Google, you would just go and search, right? And now it's at the very top of search, there's AI kind of giving you a bespoke answer. And I also feel that technology has enabled us to have bespoke echo chambers, right? Where
Yes.
our view of the world is curated for us based on what the big tech knows about us, right?
It's even bigger than that, right? I mean,
Mm.
part of the what I don't enjoy about Facebook groups is, I mean, of some of the hobby groups I'm on, there are certain questions that pop up periodically, right? It's just,
Mm.
somebody's going to be new to the group and they're going to ask, how do I do X? Whether it's sourdough or whether it's weaving or spinning or something with fiber, then somebody's going to come along and say, well, I'm a new spinner and I want to know how to do X. And it's like you just sort of have to put your face in your palm because you can already shape the arc of the response thread because people are going to argue, well, clearly you always have to do, you have to scour a fleece this way, and if you don't do it this
Yeah.
way, you're wrong. And that's a method of communication, put in square quotes, that you don't see in the real world so much, although I think it's permeating the real world a little more than it used to before everybody had email and text messages.
So let's think about, I guess this is kind of part of the consequences. What's the curative feature? In other words, regulation has come in very late and often, sometimes out of very strange places. So recently, the case against Meta, right, about the big tech's responsibility towards adolescents. Big tech got a big break in the early days of the internet because they were able to sidestep accountability. They were not treated like a utility. I started my career in the telecom world. And at one point, the big telephone companies got too big. And government decided they were going to break up Baby Bell. And they were going to tell them what businesses they could be in and what businesses they couldn't be in. And that's how it was. It was painful, and yet they did it. But not so with big tech. And one of the trends that I think has gotten bigger, and maybe we didn't emphasize it as much, is that we have very few individuals in charge of very big technology companies whose span of influence now extends beyond the tech world, beyond the business world, into the political world, into the financial world. A decision they make affects millions and millions of people.
I'm not sure. In fact, no, I'm quite confident. I don't know history well enough, but I'm not sure that that wasn't somewhat the case in a different scale
Mm.
back in the day of, the railroad barons,
Yeah.
the people who controlled land across chunks of the US and who frankly directed a lot of migration that did impact a lot of people's lives and controlled
Oh,
their
oil
outcomes.
barons, railroad barons. Yes. And what happened to
So
them?
I think that time passed and things changed is what happened to them. So I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm just saying I'm not sure it's new. It may also be at a different scale. I think what some of this points out is that regulation is not an answer at this point. Not just because it hasn't happened, but because when you get things like significant threats from residential proxies spewing
Mhm.
attack traffic, untraceable attack traffic out of networks in the US, the FCC response is to ban all non-domestic home routers. The FCC takes a hammer, says everything's a nail, and starts pounding. It's like it won't solve the problem that it's
Yeah.
supposed to solve, and it will introduce a lot of difficulty for companies. So I think there's a whole space of what are the right things to try to address through regulation in a way that allows us to continue to have global communications and commerce and travel.
Yeah, I mean, regulation can't always be the only. I don't think that there's no place for regulation.
True.
I agree with you that it's difficult, particularly in the tech world, to try and create regulation because technology runs far apace of it. But we also, gosh, I'm going back further now. I'm going back to the early 1990s. The internet was born of an era of collaboration, of globalization, of the Berlin Wall coming down, right? The world was changing. There was
It was
definitely a
certainly
belief,
optimism.
certainly optimism. And now we're in a place where it's far more divided. Even within a country, it's very divided. Countries amongst themselves are divided. We've got more wars. And yet, some of us really believe in collaboration as a means of getting a bigger problem solved. Think about climate change, right? Think about technology standards. There's no other way that you can solve that. A country alone cannot solve it. You need collaboration, yet we see, at least I see little evidence of that. What about you?
Well, I see collaboration every day at work because it's kind of my job.
Yes.
I mean, we're still at the Global Cyber Alliance, we are still looking to address major security threats in the infrastructure by working with infrastructure operators around the globe to identify the things that they need to do and then do them.
Right. But put yourself out of there. Like look at the other way. If you're looking at the world, do you see?
I'm not quite ready to give up
Yeah.
that direction though, because I see it. I have been doing this for long enough that I know it's harder now than it was 15 years ago because yes, there's a lot more corporate internal focus than there is interest in collaboration. I see it also in terms of the network operator groups that harder and harder to get people to say it really is valuable to send your employees to meet other
Yeah.
employees at other companies. So I think it is still a real thing. I think it is part of the answer for how do we make positive progress. But yeah, it's definitely hard.
And maybe in the face of it being hard, those of us who believe in collaboration have to be more vocal, have to be more persistent in pursuing that route, as opposed to what are the alternatives, right? What are the alternatives? You create your own path, right? You create your own proprietary networks, your proprietary systems.
AOL, here we come.
Right, exactly. Let's think about what we think are going to be the big stories in 5 years. And boy, that's a hard one. Pull out your crystal ball, Leslie.
Yeah, yeah. I can be quoted as having said in the past that if I could predict the future of the internet, it wouldn't be the internet.
Mm,
And that's a very positive statement in the sense of it was reflecting on the fact that everybody was building a part of the internet and you never knew what the next thing was going to be because you didn't know who was going to build it.
yeah.
And maybe we've seen a little bit of that with the tsunami of AI. I'm still a fan of the little guy. I want to see small companies succeed massively still. But so with all that by way of preamble, have you thought of anything you want to say about the next 5 years and trends?
I think we're going to see a big fight for dominance in AI, not only amongst, the known, right, the big tech, but also amongst China and the US, some of the industrialized world. I think we're already seeing AI in warfare, and that's going to raise really big questions. We did an episode called Bullets or Bytes, and I think that title is so adequate. It's so perfect for it because I was reading the other day that, we've invested in building these huge Navy ships, and yet a drone can take out a huge ship, right? So technology is changing the how battle is done and who it's done by, and it's giving leverage to those who can create that new technology as opposed to those who've had it and therefore are so invested in it. So I think, yes, I think we're going to come up with a lot of wars around AI and the role of AI, not just in the public sphere, but also personally ourselves. To what extent does AI impinge on our freedom of thought, for example? And who's collecting and harvesting this data, the copyright question. There's a lot of things that will air out over the next 6 years. I can't say I'm very optimistic. I'm cautiously
I can say you're
pessimistic.
very not optimistic. Yeah, I think you're right about the wars, one way or another, whether they get paved over,
Mm,
don't get kinetic or not, we will wait and see. I do want to note that I'm not entirely pessimistic about AI and its value. I think there are very real benefits to be reaped by people who are using it now.
mm,
Just this morning I was reading an article in the Globe and Mail about some graphics designers in Toronto that have leveraged it to their own advantage, built their own AI to harbor their ideas and allow them to achieve a scale that they couldn't otherwise have achieved.
oh, wasn't that the argument about the internet when it started, right? Like you too can.
Yeah, and I think that's a little pocket of the kind of thing that can
Mm,
remind us why some of this is worth doing if we can escape major collateral damage from the kinds
yeah.
of wars that you're describing. I mean, I think the impact of AI is certainly at least as great as the impact that the internet has had, but nobody was watching in the first 5, 10 years of the internet the way people are watching AI now, and people
Mm,
know it matters. And when I describe it as a tsunami, I'm thinking almost as much of what happens at the beginning of a tsunami, which is when all the water rushes out.
oh, I
And it's
see.
like all the water has rushed out from funding for anything but AI over the last 5 years. And now it's all going to come rushing back into places that aren't ready for as much energy as they're about to receive, and things are going to get broken.
Okay, so I think we're definitely in agreement that AI is going to be a big subject matter, regardless of what sphere
Yes.
you're talking about. What else? What other big themes do you see?
I'm going to say that I think that the important thing about AI and any other major trend here is that we have to keep watching what people do with these technologies.
Mm,
What do they use it as a tool for? Who is going to scale the mountain of AI and make it useful
mm,
beyond individual efforts and beyond large corporate bank accounts? Those are the areas to look for, I think. And those are the areas where I think we're going to see things that we didn't expect or couldn't have dreamed of. We've touched on that already a little bit with some of the use of AI for companionship and elder care.
mm. Or identifying dementia, or
Yep.
yeah. When you say people or creators, I really hope that there will emerge really some innovative companies with a different value proposition and set of values than the ones that we currently have. And one of my worries, here I go again, the worry word, is that our economy is so based on data. And it's not just data, trust is the currency, but you need to have a lot of data to even get to that level. And is it now too late that you've got very big established players? I mean, think about OpenAI, right? OpenAI is really not just OpenAI. There's significant investments from big tech into OpenAI. So you really don't have an independent, innovative like Apple started out of a garage in Northern California. Are we going to get that kind of company with a visionary leader who brings to the table not just an innovative product, but a new way of employing that product, or a new value structure about how customers and data is going to be dealt with?
Yeah, what you're describing is the barriers to entry in this game, and certainly they're pretty
Yes.
high when the kind of compute power to build LLMs at scale is of a scale unprecedented, even in terms of the internet. And even so, I will say, yes, something's going to come out of this. As long as things remain open and accessible for
Yeah.
use, then these are tools that somebody somewhere will use to build something useful. Even in the garage, when Apple was started, they were standing on hundreds of years of technology development that had led to that moment in time in engineering. They
True.
stood on the shoulders of giants too.
True. For whatever reason, I'm now thinking of in the early days of the internet, one of the calls or one of the benefits that was touted was, you can express yourself. It's a way for you to express yourself. Little did we know that that was going to become quote unquote content, and that it could potentially become a career choice of an influencer, which to this day, that also gives me hives when I say an influencer. I wonder how those will evolve. We have this influencer economy, right? And this chasing eyeballs. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I don't think either of us is going to have an answer for that one. But I will again give another counterpoint. One of the things that the internet has done is made it possible for people who enjoy particular hobbies and pastimes to find each other across the globe.
Mm,
And I think that the internet is largely responsible for the revival of the knitting hobby.
mm,
That is literally everything from sheep farming, from saving rare breeds of sheep through the Shave 'em to Save 'em program, to the indie pattern designers, to the person who likes to sit and crochet dishcloths while they're watching TV at night. And now they know they're not crazy and they're not alone.
For those who do not know, Leslie's, I can't say hobby because you're so good at it, is knitting and
I'm
anything
a
related to
fiberholic.
knitting.
I
Yes.
am a fiberholic. Although, to your point, I will observe that the website that I set up when blogs were a new thing, where I put up pictures of my various completed projects, I note that that website still has an awful lot of traffic. And I suspect it's not people. I suspect that I would find a lot of the images of my work showing up in
Oh,
places that
yeah.
I did not intend for them to show up,
Yes. Yes. You became a content creator.
apparently.
Hmm. Okay. I think we ought to wrap this up. What do you want to say as our parting?
I think what I want to say is that I think that technology still presents people with useful tools and that we need to take it one step at a time. Going back to the pandemic and the deep, dark depths of 2020, it was impossible to imagine how we were ever going to come out on the other side of this. And yet here we are. No, the pandemic is in fact not done, but we are more or less living lives normally now for most of us anyway. So let's take this one step at a time and just keep looking for where are those interesting bits of technology and their consequences that are showing up all over the globe.
I am very grateful for you actually suggesting that we start this because I always say it gives me such a great excuse to go research things that I wouldn't normally and talk to people who are way smarter about things that I wouldn't normally talk to them about. I do hope that if we're around in another 6 years, that we look back and we remark how some of these problems that we predicted were innovatively solved, as opposed to looking at these problems and saying, oh my gosh, they now seem quaint. We've got bigger problems. So I leave that with hope and gratitude.
And I'll express my gratitude for the fact that you said yes when I suggested that we do a podcast and have led the way in creating these episodes as stories with interesting themes and direction as opposed to me just splattering along about technology all the time.
It's good. It's
I
a good
look
team.
forward to the next 6 years, indeed.
It was a
Thank you so
pleasure being
much.
on your podcast with you.
Likewise. Thanks for listening to this TechSequences podcast. We are Leslie Daigle and Alexa Raad. You can reach us by email, techsequences@techsequences.org. We'd love to hear from you to know what you thought about this episode or ideas for future episodes. TechSequences. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and subscribe through your favorite podcasting service.